A common misconception is that privacy costs money, and I wanted to challenge this misconception, and I made this massive post that dives into the free options in every single category of every privacy service that exists out there, as well as the paid options and what the differences are. Today I'm going to walk you through what does budget privacy look like, what sacrifices does it entail, if any, and what are the possible scenarios. And I'm going to break down what's a $13 a month scenario, a $5 a month scenario, and a $0 a month scenario. And yes, you can have amazing privacy for $0 a month. If you keep your notes and thoughts inside a big tech platform like Google's ecosystem, you don't really own those. Google has full access to your ideas when you go through them, and they use it to personalize ads towards you. When you use a product like Notesnook though, that's just not what happens, because Notesnook uses end-to-end encryption to keep your notes safe, meaning that not even they can access your notes, only you can. If you want to be reassured even more, everything they do is open source, so you can go ahead and analyze the code to make sure that it is doing what it's supposed to do. They offer some incredible usability, and they offer some of the most complex tools that you can use to pretty much do anything you want, from keeping to-do lists, to making scripts for videos, to journaling on a daily basis, to even having a second brain, kind of like Obsidian, all with the privacy and security protections. Check out Notesnook down in the description or here on the screen. They're a wonderful service and they're free to try, so give them a shot. Your browser is the gateway to the internet and is probably one of the most important decisions you have to make for your privacy journey. Tor browser is completely free and is probably one of, if not the most private browser option out there. Mullvad browser is right there alongside it, also free. Brave browser is free at the cost of ads. Firefox is also free. There's also Mull for Android, and you have your default browsers that come with your computers. The whole privacy costs money argument completely falls apart with browsers, because the better options that are not the defaults are still free. Password managers are up next, and this is an area where a lot of people might think you have to pay money. Not true. Password managers are important because that's how you create and store unique and strong passwords, which is probably the most important thing for you to keep your accounts safe. The most secure password manager out there is offline and puts all of the control in your court, and it's KeePass, which is entirely free and syncs for free, but on your own accord. Even if you're going for more traditional cloud password manager, Bitwarden is fantastic, and they're open source, and their free option is probably more than good enough for most of you out there. And if you want the premium features, it's less than $1 a month if you buy the annual plan. Alternatively, Proton Pass is another option that, yes, is free and also open source, but also gives you a super cheap and affordable option. So I would say that most password managers, regardless of what you go with, you're looking at $0 to $2 a month, which is dirt cheap. And again, this will be a factor later when we talk about the kind of the three workflows you have. TOTP is those 6-digit codes that you generate to keep your accounts a little bit safer in the event that your password is breached. And these are pretty much universally entirely free. In fact, the best option right now that's cross-platform and open source is Ente Auth. Entirely free to use. And if you're on Android and you only want an Android option, Aegis is there as well, and it's also free and open source. $0 a month. Firewalls allow you to control the incoming and outgoing traffic on your computer, and this is another area that's $0 a month. You have Lulu on macOS, also NetGuard on Android for those of you on Android. iOS users, there's no real way to use a firewall tool because Apple doesn't want you to. You have Portmaster on Windows and Linux, and these are all open source tools, entirely free to use, and give you a massive amount of privacy. Your operating system actually comes with your hardware by default. Every operating system out there is free, and especially the ones like Linux and a lot of custom OSs for Android are all entirely free and are in some ways cheaper than your typical operating system. Windows is actually a paid operating system, and Apple's macOS is tied to expensive Apple hardware. So with Linux, you can even get an older computer that still has modern support for a modern operating system, which is just not an option with Windows or macOS. What you can get with Linux and some other alternatives to mainstream operating systems is very much, in fact, $0 a month and might actually save you money. All of you probably use a search engine, so this isn't something I need to convince you to use, but I will try to convince you to use a more privacy-focused search engine. Most search engines out there are already free, but fortunately the privacy-respecting ones are also free. You have things like DuckDuckGo, you have Brave Search, you have Start Page. You can even self-host something like Searching, and I don't think for most of you, you really need to pay to have a good privacy-respecting free search engine. $0 a month. A VPN is something that we've covered a lot, and I'll leave a card here for a video that dives into whether you even need a VPN, because realistically, a lot of people don't need one. But VPNs still offer a lot of nice privacy protections by protecting your IP address and that being a core data point to correlate you across different websites. This is where things start to get interesting, because I think the free versus paid options have genuine differences. But I'm gonna go through these. First off, Tor is always an option that's free. Calyx and RiseUp are free and trustworthy VPNs, though very slow as they're run by just a few volunteer services that only host 1 or 2 servers apiece. Proton VPN is a free plan, which you can now use without even needing a Proton account, at least on Android, and I believe iOS should be coming soon. Orbot is another way to kind of repurpose a VPN slot on your mobile devices by still going through Tor, but at least it's done system-wide. So this is another free option for those of you out there. WinSky VPN also has a free VPN option, but it's limited on bandwidth. So this is only if you're going to use a VPN for just a few things here and there. That's really the only way you could use that realistically. Now, from there, I have a few more paid options here that I've written down. And the first one is also WinScribe. They have a build your own plan, which starts at $3 a month, which is a super good value. And they're a really good quality VPN service that's very privacy focused and does well on things like our open source chart that just compares objective data points between VPN providers. Mullvad is next, and they're one of, if not the best, privacy respecting VPN provider out there. They're entirely open source, like WinScribe is as well, and they have a flat rate of $5 per month. With that said, iVPN is right up there with Mullvad, also open source and also does extremely well, and their standard plan also starts at $5 a month, but it's quite a bit more restrictive than Mullvad's $5 a month. The last thing I want to mention is that for those of you who don't want a system-wide VPN, but you're fine with just a VPN-like tool in your web browser, Apple actually really kicks ass here with Apple Private Relay, which is a very compelling option that starts at 99 cents a month and gives you essentially a hardcore VPN in all of your web traffic within the Safari browser. But that means you now have to use Safari and you have to only use Apple devices. So this is probably restricted to just a very few people who are tied into that workflow. So I think VPNs are the first category where the free options are substantially worse than the paid options. And the main thing that you're sacrificing is speed. I've used a lot of these free VPNs in the past. I think of all of them, Proton is probably the most compelling free option because it gives you still usable enough speeds and also still very good protection. I think this is the first category where you might have to pay, but it's also not a tool you may even need. So the range is around $0 to $5 a month. DNS is something that you all use, and it's essentially what allows you to just type in google.com or techlore.tech into your web browser, and then behind the scenes your DNS provider will take that domain that you type in and convert it into its necessary IP address, so you never have to deal with accessing the IP address of a website. You probably want to be using a DNS that's privacy respecting because your DNS provider can get a lot of insight into your web traffic. So, at minimum, if you're using a VPN, you can just trust your VPN's DNS. If you're not using a VPN, make sure that you're all switching to a privacy-respecting DNS provider. I highly recommend Mullvad's DNS. You can even use their block lists to filter things like adult websites or gambling or ads and things like that. If you want something that gives you a little bit more control and power, I really enjoy NextDNS, and there's also things like Control D that give you a really nice in-depth ability to customize what kind of web traffic is allowed onto your devices. DNS, for all of you out there, is probably between $0 and $2 a month, incredibly cheap. End-to-end encrypted messengers are a must-have, and fortunately for us, they're almost all entirely free, especially the ones we recommend here. You're gonna see us recommend Signal, Session, SimpleX, and Threema. So the first three are free. Threema is not. Threema is a one-time purchase, so it's not a recurring subscription, but that is the only paid option, and frankly, I don't have many reasons to recommend Threema over something like Signal to a majority of people. Long story short, messengers, $0 a month. On the topic of safe communication, email is another place where there's a pretty big difference between free and paid options. So let's get into it. Proton is the biggest name in this space, and they range from $0 to around $13 a month. Tuda offers a compelling plan for under $4 a month, which I really enjoy and I find to be a really good value, and it offers similar storage to Gmail with calendar and custom domain support. Both of them offer free options though, which are very limited, but if you're somebody who's very budget oriented, you could even have a mainstream email like Gmail or something and still have Proton as a second email that you use for more sensitive things that require that higher degree of privacy and security. And I'll talk about more of these kind of clever workflows later in the video. For now though, email is about $0 to $13 a month. Something I talk a lot about on the channel is aliasing, which is the concept of you have one provider that generates multiple data points to use so that you don't have to trust tons of websites with your information. So an example of this is email aliasing. Instead of you handing out your one email to 50 websites, you use something like Simple Login to generate 50 unique email aliases that all forward to one place. It's a fantastic way to compartmentalize things in a very convenient way. And of all the aliasing services out there, the general price range you're going to see is between $0 to $4 a month. You can work within the means of a Simple Login free plan, which includes 10 aliases. You can also use, instead of Simple Login, ADIO, which arguably has a better free plan depending on what you need it for. You could even use both, and there are other services like DuckDuckGo's aliasing feature, which you can kind of just pick and choose the features that work best for you, all entirely for free. Kind of a nod to what I said earlier about people who happen to be using the iCloud ecosystem for one reason or another. That 99-cent subscription comes with Apple's Hide My Email feature, which you could also use in this situation as well. There are other aliasing services out there like privacy.com, which also just start with a free plan. And when it comes to paying for these services, generally the max price per month you're going to find is $4 a month, regardless if you go with Simple Login, ADIO, or whatever other service I mentioned. So far, everything in this video is either free or really great value, depending on what you need. But this is going to be the first category that I think will be a bit of a letdown, and it's going to be cloud storage. Cloud storage is expensive. With that said, here are some options to throw your way. The only way to go free is if you keep a lot of storage locally and work within the constraints of free cloud provider plans. So you could use multiple plans and try to get more storage that way, but it's going to be tough. If you get something like Proton Unlimited, you get plenty of included cloud storage via Proton Drive, which is 500 gigabytes. If you went with Apple iCloud, which is another workflow that I'll continue talking about, and you got that $1 a month plan, you get 50 gigabytes, and their $2.99 a month option is 200 gigabytes. Again, if you set up like some kind of just dummy, just need to use for random things Google account, you could try to take advantage of that free Google storage and even use a tool like Cryptomator to encrypt your documents before they go to Google. So yeah, cloud storage is going to vary from free to honestly kind of infinite. It really depends on what your cloud storage needs are. And I will say I do have a NAS personally that allows me to get away with not really needing a lot of these services. So I'll leave a link to my NAS review that you can watch. Notes, docs, and photos. I'm going to keep this very simple. Notes and docs are easy. The sponsor of this video, Notesnook, is a free option. They're open source and they have a very cheap and affordable premium option as well. But there's also things like Crypty, which are also open source and start for free. And you can also just host notes locally via things like Obsidian or even just regular default note programs that come on your devices. It's not hard to keep notes for free. Where things do get tough, for the same reason that cloud storage is tough, is photos. Ente Photos is probably the best option out there, which does have a free plan, but it's very low storage because it's expensive to host photos and videos for people. So your options kind of come down to storing everything locally or using something like a NAS, which I already alluded to. If you're somebody in the Apple ecosystem, you can get iCloud Photos with advanced data protection, which gives you end-to-end encryption for however much storage you need. And you can get this for $2.99 a month and combine that with your cloud storage for a very low cost. And then if you went with Proton Unlimited, you get plenty of storage for photos, though I will caution you that Proton Photos is not really a traditional photos suite you might be thinking of. It's more of running your photos in a cloud drive provider. So it does do automatic uploads in the background, but that's about the extent of what Proton Photos is in this point in time. I do hope and think it'll get better. Overall, I really want to break the myth that privacy needs to cost money, and I think going through each category should demonstrate that. But now I want to give you all some sample workflows. 3 different people who have chosen 3 different budgets and what I am going to assign to them to use. The first person has a budget of $13 a month, the second person has a budget of about $5 a month, and the last person has a budget of $0 per month. If we put these up here, you're gonna see that browsers and desktop operating systems are the same across the board. From there, DNS slightly varies, but overall, all three people gain access to almost the exact kind of protection, unless someone needs to use something like Control-D or a paid Next DNS plan. Email is a big separation between the three of them. The first person chooses Proton Unlimited, which is going to be a really nice, robust ecosystem with really quality privacy and security on the email front. The next person does Tuda Revolutionary for $4 a month, which is a really great value and gives you access to another fantastic email provider. The budget one is where things are going to get tough, because my sample workflow here is using something like a Google and Apple email in addition to something like a free Proton or Tudo account for sensitive actions, which are combined with aliasing tools to kind of fill in the gaps on maybe the Gmail or Apple email that you use. So you have to be a little creative on the email side of things, but overall, there is a lot of variety here and you can kind of pick the workflow that works the best for you. We established that firewalls are free, and then aliasing is another place where you might have to get a little creative. If you got the Proton subscription, you already get aliasing for free with simple login. And if you go the middle route, since Tuda doesn't offer this, I recommend going with Apple's Hide email feature, which is included for 99 cents. Or if you're not in the Apple ecosystem, you're going to be looking at a free simple login or ADIO or DuckDuckGo aliasing solution. Either way though, this is going to keep the budget with under $5 a month. As for the free option, your only option here is to use a free simple login or ADIO account, or maybe something like DuckDuckGo. So you have to pick here what you're willing to sacrifice, but every budget has an option to give you a large amount of protection. From there, you have password managers, and if you went with Proton's ecosystem, Proton Pass is included for the same $13 a month. From there, you can use KeePass or a free cloud password manager like Bitwarden, or even Proton Pass's free plan you can use with this middle budget. And it's the same exact thing for the free plan to keep it $0. Everybody gets the same access to free messengers, and everybody gets the same access to free mobile operating systems. As for a VPN, if you went with Proton's ecosystem, you can use Proton VPN, which is included in the subscription. If you go with Apple's private relay, you get that for 99 cents on top of Tuda's plan. Or you can use no VPN, or you can use a trusted free VPN. And then of course, the only options you have for the free section are to opt to use no VPN or use a trusted free VPN. All of those we covered earlier. Search engines are free, TOTP is free, and as for cloud storage, your options are going to be just using Proton's cloud storage, which includes 500 gigabytes included in the $13 a month. Or if you're going down the middle tier, you can use iCloud for 99 cents. Otherwise, you have to rely on the free options I covered earlier, which are also the same options you have now, which is to use included storage for Google or another free cloud account and try to store the data locally, and also using tools like Cryptomator to use end-to-end encryption for those cloud providers, even if they don't offer it. Notes, docs, and photos are included for the most part with Proton's ecosystem and can be combined with free tools like Notesnook, Crypty, or your local notes. If you went down the middle, pretty much the same thing, but you also have the option of using iCloud for 99 cents. And then if you're going free, you're just limited to free plans. Now these prices are regular standard monthly pricing. They're not based on annual plans, they're not based on any discounts, and you might even be able to find discounts, especially in light of Black Friday coming soon, and we'll have a video on Black Friday for you all to catch some discounts. Putting these three people together, I think it really makes the Proton ecosystem look really compelling when a single $13 a month subscription gets you so much good stuff. But if you're creative and you really want to go on a tight budget, you can go down that middle tier or even the free tier, and it does require sacrifices and a little bit more planning, but it's extremely possible and you still get a huge amount of protection. So I don't think that you need to pay money to still get a large amount of privacy. So takeaways for you and people you know. When someone says that privacy is unattainable because it costs money or because the services are too hard to use or it's too inconvenient, I would mention that there are some fantastic services that offer super generous free options or cheap options that make privacy more than accessible for all of you. These are the services that are really championing for digital rights, and they're doing it super well, and I think the fact that I made this video and could prove to people that it's possible should demonstrate that they have the right values and they're prioritizing all of your digital rights. It's really cool to see. With that said, I'm somebody who pays for a very expensive Proton business plan, and I've donated to Signal in the past. I still try to give money where I can, because I think if everybody tried to use these services entirely for free, they wouldn't be able to offer free services in the first place. So I really also want to send a message that this video exists for people that need to be on the budget, but if you're somebody who can spend a little bit more, you can help these companies grow and continue to compete against big tech. That is just as important as offering budget options. With all that said, I want to hear what you all think and some of your tips to save a few bucks in your privacy journey. I am really happy that I got the opportunity to do that on our forum. Somebody asked about budget privacy, and I got a little carried away and made a massive post, and I realized at the end of it, I should probably just make a video on this. So if you want to see more nuanced, more in-depth discussions and even share some of your budget tips, our forum at discuss.techlore.tech is a wonderful place to do that. And I want to thank our sponsor of this video, Notesnook. They're an amazing service that, just in light of this video, they offer free and amazing paid plans as well. Check it all out in the description. Join our Patreon if you enjoy this content and you got value from it, and we'll see you next time on Techlore.